Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast. With your hosts, Ashley and Michael, please sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the newest episode of the Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast presented by the Undroppables and sponsored by Analyst Depot. I'm your host, Ashley, and this is my co-host, Michael Duncan.
Hey, everyone. Happy 10th episode, Ashley.
I know.
It's like a centennial or something. That's the wrong one.
Yeah, that's definitely wrong.
Like our dime anniversary. I don't know.
I mean, I really can't believe we've been doing this for 10 weeks. That is mind-blowing.
Well, when you say it like that, it sounds a lot more impressive.
It has. It is pretty impressive.
Well, technically, I've been doing it for 10 weeks. You did it for 9 weeks.
Because I missed one episode, so I've done it for 9 weeks. This is 9 for me, but...
Well, I take back my celebration and my congratulations, and I'll congratulate you next week.
Wow, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so newest week. We just finished up week 9 in the NFL. We are the midway point of this season. Really crazy. It was a crazy week. A lot of upsets, a lot of really weird games, including the one where the Bills lost to the Jags in a score of 9-6. Strange.
Fun story about that. I did a parlay, and the thing that I put in there because I had a good feeling about it to kind of like build up the odds or whatever was having Jacksonville beat the Bills outright. That was the only part of the parlay I got correct.
Of course.
Yeah. It hurt. It really hurt. It really hurt. Because, you prepare yourself to go 3 of 4 and get the Jags winning wrong. But there we go.
You knew that risk going into it. But at least you're not like one of the people that bet for Dallas to boost the odds and be like, this is an easy one. Of course, Dallas is going to win. And then they lose.
That felt good. They got shut out. I don't care what the score says. They got shut out.
It was garbage time. If they stayed shut out, that would have been the first time they lost, like, on the scorecard. It would have been the first time they were shut out at home in over 30 years.
When was the last time they were shut out?
I don't know, but that's at home specifically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In 30 years. So I wished it was 0 so I could have sent out a tweet just laughing at it. But I'm still laughing. It was really, really enjoyable to watch that game. Especially especially as a fan of the only team that won in the division this week. So, what can I say?
I mean, honestly, that was the best Eagles game that I've watched all season. I mean, we won 2 games, but this game was actually enjoyable and was competitive, and we ran the ball. It was great. It was a good time. I had a good time,
I know.
It was
fun. They looked pretty good. I honestly didn't expect, I knew they were going to do well. I mean, they have been doing fairly well. I didn't expect them to put up that much of a fight, though. It was a fight down to the last minute. So
absolutely.
I appreciate watching good football, and that was just a good football game. But we'll get started. We have a lot to talk about today, so we're going to jump into it the same way we always do with our injury report, starting with our quarterbacks. It came out this week that Sam Darnold has an incomplete fracture to his scapula, which is your shoulder blade, and he'll miss 4 to 6 weeks around that range. And he will be benched for PJ Walker is his backup.
Former XFL legend PJ Walker, specifically.
I know. Big XFL guy. A lot of depth here. NFL.
Wait, did you say big XFL. X-Buckeye?
Big XFL guy.
Oh, XFL guy. I was like, that had nothing to do with Ohio State, but thank you for clarifying. I can't hear today. Jesus,
yeah, I can tell.
This is going to be good.
I couldn't speak last week. You can't hear this week. It's
perfect.
Always a really good time here. At least those 2 things aren't happening on the same week because that would have been a disaster.
Oh, we would have had to stop the show 10 minutes in.
We really would have. Next up, Baker Mayfield got a cut on his knee. He missed a few snaps, came back into the game. He was quoted saying, quote, "It's just a flesh wound, so he'll be fine." Trevor Lawrence has a right low ankle sprain. He's considered day-to-day. He did finish out the game. It looked pretty gnarly. I didn't expect him to come back in the game. He did consider day-to-day. Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, his leg hurt during a roughing the passer penalty. He told reporters after the game that he's fine, a little bit of soreness, but that's about it. Kyler Murray ended up not playing in week 9 because of a high ankle sprain. And there's a lot of talk again from beat reporters that he may miss this week too. I think that's something to really keep an eye on, especially
He hasn't
if
been. He has not been back to practice yet, as of Wednesday when we're recording this.
Yep. So that's that you really have to keep an eye on. Wide receivers, Gunner, I really don't know how to pronounce his last name. Also, Zuski, he's the main punt returner for the Patriots. He suffered a head injury. He left the game early. He's one of like 3 guys who suffered a head injury during the Patriots game. Chase Claypool suffered a toe injury. He was set to have an MRI yesterday, but I hadn't seen any updates on that yet. DeAndre Hopkins also missed week 9 with an ankle injury. He's considered day-to-day, but it's looking a lot more hopeful for him to come back this week.
Although he still has not practiced.
Yes.
As well as Kyler Murray.
Yeah, the big test for that, like I said last week, will be tomorrow. A lot of guys will miss practice on Wednesdays or up until Wednesdays if it's something a little bit more serious. Thursdays is usually the day to gauge those how serious injuries are. Antonio Brown is coming off of a bye week, but was seen a few days ago still in a walking boot, but as of today, he had shed that walking boot. He's still pretty probable to miss this week, but it looks like he's on trending upwards. Some people, I didn't see the video, but some people were talking about a video posted of him during his rehab that said you could tell something was still a little bit off, and that was kind of the talk of his injury. But it's looking up. It's, you and I were questioning the seriousness of that there may be a pretty lengthy stay off the field, but it's looking a lot better. DJ Moore got hit pretty hard and suffered a rib contusion during the game. He's considered day-to-day as well.
And I will say, going back to the Broncos for a second, I think AB's injury takes on a bigger impact with the news that Chris Godwin was added to the injury report today with a foot injury. Kind of came out of nowhere, and he also might miss this week. So they might be down both Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin. Yeah,
they did sign Rashad Perryman, which kind of adds to the fact that they needed a little bit more depth. They were talking about how we're probably going to leave him on practice squad for the week and then possibly pull him up before the game, depending on how those 2 injuries play out for this week.
Yeah, I think we'll be seeing young guys, Tyler Johnson, and maybe even rookie Jalen Darden, hopefully stepping up into taking a more significant role in the offense, which would be cool. So
I would be really excited to watch Jalen Darden. I think that would be great.
Well, I would be excited to watch Tyler Johnson. So
yeah. Running backs, Chase Edmonds suffered a high ankle sprain, will miss multiple weeks, out likely 4 to 6 games. This was on the first play. Was it the first play of the game? It was definitely the first drive.
It was one of the first. I think it might have been his first snap.
That's bad. Not great. I'm pretty sure he's expected to go on IR. James Conner ended up taking over and scoring a touchdown. So good for James Conner, bad for Chase Edmonds.
He has the most touchdowns in the league right now, James Conner does.
Yeah, crazy. Zach Moss was ruled out with a concussion, listed as week to week, not day to day. So it's all going to depend on how he goes through protocol. Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. So this now makes 3 Patriots out with a head injury. Both of them left the game early with a head injury, and both of them are in concussion protocol. I didn't see Ramondre Stevenson's hit, but I saw Damian Harris's one. Did not look good. That looked like it really hurt.
Yeah. Then again, they all look like they would hurt me. So
They do. And man, I had a concussion, a really bad one. Those stink.
Me too.
Did you?
I got it at an Eagles game.
No way. Were you
no. Well, I was playing football in the parking lot, and I ran into a steel girder.
Okay, I can't even say anything because my bad concussion came from passing out into a brick wall. So
that's worse than mine, and I don't normally hear stories that are worse than my concussion story.
Listen, I was at the beach. I was at the beach when I lived in Hawaii. I went alone, and I was dehydrated, and I stood up. And then I was a little bit dizzy, so I sat back down. And I stood up, and I felt fine, and I walked away. And then I was, rinsing off my feet, and I think the cold water, shocked my body, and that I was dehydrated, and then I passed out into a brick wall.
No one's going to feel bad for you when you start a story off. When I lived in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Moving on. Running backs.
True. Running backs. Devante Booker suffered a hip contusion. He's listed as week to week. He was seen after the game saying he felt pretty good post-game. Giants are on a bye week, so he probably won't miss time, but will rescind some of his work because Saquon Barkley is expected back in week 11 post-Giants bye. I still see Devante Booker being, a backup and some relief for Saquon, but I don't see him being as fantasy viable as he was in previous weeks. He was pretty fantasy viable this week.
I mean, I don't think you're really going to want to start the backup running back for the Giants because you barely really want to start the starting running back for that offense.
I agree. But what I was saying is if a lot of people picked up Devante Booker after the Saquon injury news. By the way, did I even tell you I got my first Saquon Barkley in fantasy football because somebody in my home league dropped him?
I have a friend that dropped Saquon Barkley. I called him a moron.
Yeah.
Shout out, Bub.
Shout out, Bub. This was during by Mageddon, and my league mate dropped him, I guess, because they were really suffering and maybe thought they were going to be able to get him back, and they didn't because I was ahead of them in the waiver wire. So anyway, keep going. Alvin Kamara did not practice today because of a knee injury. I don't think this is too serious. All the reports seem to be like he was taking a day off, a little bit of a knee soreness. Ezekiel Elliott suffered a knee contusion. He had it wrapped and had a hot pack on during the game. He said to reporters he's been dealing with a knee injury for some time now. He's listed as day-to-day. It's unclear if the knee injury he was talking about has anything to do with the knee injury from the game, like if it was a flare-up. But he's listed as day-to-day, not week-to-week, so it doesn't seem too bad. Darrell Henderson. Tony Pollard is the guy he split snaps with, so if it's anything serious, Tony Pollard's there. Both of them, I won't even call Tony Pollard a backup because they've kind of been sharing a lot of the work. So Darrell Henderson left the game with an ankle injury but returned to play, so that's not too serious. For tight ends, Albert O suffered a knee injury and did not return. He came into the game after being on the injury report that week as limited with a knee injury, so it seems like that was a flare-up. It doesn't seem too serious, but it doesn't seem kind of just throw it to the wind. So that's something to keep an eye on. Jonnu Smith suffered a shoulder injury. He left the game early. It was found out to be a sprain of his AC joint. So Caden Smith got a concussion and was ruled out for the rest of the game. For O-line and defense, I have two big ones. Patrick Surtain III suffered a knee injury and left the game early. And Darius Slay suffered a hamstring injury and did not return. And for the best part of the injury report is the good news. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is designated to return from IR, as is Chris Carson. They're both slated to come back. As always, I'll tell you that coming off of IR means you have a 21-day window in which you can be activated to the active roster. So they may not play this week, but they can. George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey both came back this week. Noah Fant is coming off of the COVID list, and Mike White is back and better than ever and is expected to start this week.
I'm excited for the Mike White experience to return.
The Mike White experience is amazing.
Unfortunately, it's against Buffalo, but
I mean, they did just lose to the Jags, so
it's fair. It's a good point.
Wait, oh my God! Before we jump into anything else. One thing I wanted to say is I sent it in our Undroppables thing, but there's this streak. Okay, there's two streaks going on, actually, that I want to talk about before we get in. There's two streaks. One, there's a curse. There is the Manning cast curse.
Yeah.
Every player that has been this is news, by the way, so I mean it helps you kind of set your fantasy lineups and look at who you want to sports bet. But there's a Manning cast, obviously, clearly anybody knows about it. The players that are on Manning cast for the week, the next week their team loses the game. Every single one of them.
You killed that sentence. That was great.
Yeah, it really. We're not doing well with speaking lately. We'll figure it out. The second one is another streak. The team that wins their Monday night matchup has won their following game since week 14 of last season.
I didn't know that one. That's very interesting, actually.
Really crazy. It was actually the reason I chose the Saints to beat the Bucs in one of my parlays, because since week 14 of last week, that's a really long streak, and it's still going. This week, the Steelers won, so it would be something to look at if the Steelers are going to win this week. But yeah, that streak is still alive. Good
to know.
Right? Okay. Now I'm good with my two interesting fun facts that I wanted to jump into before we get into.
And a little bit more of news is the official release of Odell Beckham Jr. from the Cleveland Browns. And he is supposedly still deciding between a couple teams. The favorites right now, it seems to be between four teams for the most part. The Saints, the Packers, the Chiefs, and the Patriots. If you had to take a guess, who would you say he signs with?
He has said a lot of times he really wants to be with a contender. I could see him going to the Chiefs. I could see the Chiefs taking it, but honestly, I don't doubt that the Patriots are making a really strong push. I really don't know though, because even Devonte Adams was like, I've reached out to him. I would love to have him here. There's a place for him here. I would probably say the Patriots, but they're not as much of a contender. They're still contending, but I don't know, probably the Patriots.
They've been pretty good these past couple weeks. I will give them that.
Especially with Buffalo losing, they have a clear path.
Yeah, it's funny. The favorites seem to be the Saints from all the reports we've been getting, but I'd put them as if I was Odell Beckham Jr., they would probably be my last option. I mean, I think if you're trying to win right now, the Packers make a ton of sense. The Patriots are obvious. I mean, it's the Patriots, so there's just a sense of, you're always going to have a chance to win if you go there, unless it's last year, but it's not. And then obviously a chance to play with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. They need, I think, adding that second really, really good wide receiver would give them something they haven't really had. And I don't think Tyreek Hill needs to be an overly, like a target monster. So it would be interesting to have kind of a different role on that offense. It's not really, their role doesn't necessarily have to overlap. So I don't know. I'm going to go with the Packers, but
yeah, and I think with the Chiefs too, it's like we've seen time and time again that having a good second, level of wide receiver helps alleviate the pressure from like wide receiver ones. So having a good wide receiver 2 improves outcomes for wide receiver ones. So if the Chiefs have someone like OBJ, who seems like he still has a lot of good left in him, then I think it would help kind of get Tyreek Hill out of this little bit of a rut that he's been feeling. So having him on the Chiefs could be really beneficial for the Chiefs and for Tyreek Hill. I'm probably going to go with the Patriots as my favorite. The Saints being the favorite is a little strange to me. I mean,
obviously they have
wide
no
receiver one if he goes there. So I think that's probably why everyone's saying that, but still.
Yeah, I mean, granted, like they're the 5th or 6th seed right now, and they probably are going to make the playoffs. I don't know how you can necessarily. Looks like I lost you on the stream. Yeah, that was odd. That's odd. Anyway, but yeah, moving on. What is our next segment? What is the first thing we're really talking about today?
We're going to talk about the rookie report. So we have done an episode before where we talked about a rookie report involving only quarterbacks, but today we're going to look at, I think we have 6 rookies. We're kind of going to analyze how they're doing, what they're looking like, see what the best rookie we like so far this year out of our list. So we could jump right into it. The first one we have is Rashad Bateman, who missed a lot of the early weeks due to a groin injury that he sustained during preseason. But he now has on the year 12 receptions on 19 targets for 161 yards and no touchdown yet. He's averaging 13.4 yards per reception.
Yeah, he's been really just kind of exactly what I think a lot of people thought he was going to be coming out of the draft. Obviously, like he hasn't, I don't think he's had like that huge, massive breakout game. He did have 80 yards against Cincinnati, which was awesome, but he hasn't even played 70% of snaps yet. And part of that's definitely, learning the offense, coming back from the injury that derailed the beginning of his season a little bit. But Lamar is balling out right now. He's throwing, I think, as well as we've really seen him do in his career. The Ravens are kind of a bit of a mess on the running side of the ball, with obviously the exception of Lamar, with the exception of the quarterback Lamar. So I think between Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, and Rashad Bateman, you all of a sudden have a very scary wide receiving core. When, gosh dang it, I was trying to hold it in. When in the past it's been like a very scarily bad wide receiving core. So he's been a very smart player. He's been a very effective route runner. He got 8 targets last week and his most receptions with 5. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in the upcoming weeks and to finish out the season as he gets the NFL more under his feet. And obviously is a great matchup coming this week against Miami, and a couple good matchups to end the season. So it's going to be really, really interesting.
I agree. He's proving himself to be a pretty good, the entire time we expect him to be a pretty good deep ball catcher, which is great. I think we can see that starting to come to fruition a little bit more. And I think that will be something we see in the coming weeks, especially against defenses like Miami. Mark Andrews has kind of taken over a lot of the red zone work, as has Lamar himself. But I could see Rashad Bateman being used in the red zone. Rashad Bateman seems to be like a very good, well-rounded receiver, which is awesome. Rashad Bateman was one of my favorite rookies coming out of the draft. One of my favorite rookie receivers coming out of the draft. So I'm really excited. I think he's so fun to watch. That's, like I say it all the time that I just genuinely love watching football. So being able to see a player like him on my TVs is one of my favorite things. He's so fun to watch. All of his interviews are awesome. And I don't know, one of the crazy fun facts from this last game is that 11 of his receptions through his 11 receptions, all 11 of them went for a first down. I don't know how that finished in the rest of the game, but all of his first 11 receptions went for a first down, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds exactly kind of the role that he's going to play in this offense, at least to start, with Hollywood Brown being a burner and, Mark Andrews kind of owning that middle of the field. Rashad Bateman is just a wide receiver with good size, good speed, and he knows how to get open. And I think that's exactly what Lamar needs on that offense, and is a very, very good complement to honestly both Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews. It's cool to see them with a full fledged of weapons that cover a lot of different areas.
Yep. Rashad Bateman ran a 4.48 40, so he is pretty fast. He's played I don't think we mentioned he's played 3 games total, averaging 9.4 fantasy points per game. And he has a pretty decent sized air yards. He has 168 air yards on the season.
Yeah, and I only expect that to go up. I mean, I think he's going to just help the offense grow. He's going to help Lamar grow as a passer a little bit more, and he's going to help get Hollywood and Mark Andrews open. So I'm excited to see. The second half of the year is almost always good for rookie wide receivers as they adjust to the game and their quarterbacks adjust to them. So he's a guy that I'm keeping an eye on, both in fantasy and just in the real NFL, and just I expect to excel in the second half of the season as Lamar kind of tries to keep up his what might possibly be another MVP season. So,
yep. On to the next. I think I'm going to actually skip over this one and go to the next one. We'll go to that one after. But Elijah Moore, who has 22 receptions on 40 targets for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns, playing for the Jets.
Yeah, I guess Mike White unlocked him. Obviously, he started the season playing a lot of the snaps and then got injured, I believe, in week 3. And he was out for a little bit. He was kind of struggling with that injury. I think even when he was playing, he still wasn't really himself. He was still struggling to stay on the field and struggling to be effective on the field. But apparently all it took was a little bit of Mike White. And obviously, he only played 36% of the snaps against Cincy in week 8. But he had 6 targets and 6 receptions for 67 yards. And then last week against Indianapolis with, I don't even remember who the backup after Mike White was when he got injured. But he was able to go for over 84 yards and over 80 yards and 2 touchdowns on 7 receptions. So he's finally looking like the guy that he was when he came out, which is just a really, really, really good wide receiver. He doesn't have exceptional size. He doesn't have, he's not a burner. He just is a guy that understands the game of football. And I really hope that Zach Wilson can figure out how to use him when he gets back on the field, because he's only going to make his life easier.
I completely agree. He is another one that's pretty well-rounded. He's also had a decent sized air yards, 430 in 7 games played. I think Mike White was exactly what he needed. I don't know what wasn't clicking, though, with the first few weeks of the season with Zach Wilson. I think it may just be that Zach Wilson has not come into his own yet, and Mike White probably has a little bit more. Mike White has been in the NFL longer. I think that probably has a lot to do with it. And Zach Wilson was relying on more veterans, but watching him play has been so fun. He was exactly what you said. He's been proving himself to be what he was touted to be coming out of the NFL draft, which is really cool. A lot of people compared him, even Player Profiler has him most comparable to Tyler Lockett. And I do see that in kind of their style of play too. But yeah, he the past 2 weeks has been a lot of fun to watch. I was trying to find his. I'll find it a little bit. But yeah, anything else you have to add?
No, I mean, just that, it's nice to see these guys that had a rough start to the season, those two being the best examples with injuries. It's just nice to see them go out there and ball out. I mean, obviously, two very different situations, one being a very competitive team and a very, high-powered offense, and the other one being a very uncompetitive team and a very low-powered offense, if that's even a term. But it's just nice to see them ball out, and you have to feel a little bit, you have to feel good for the young guys to be able to get out there and do what they're supposed to do. So
Yep. Pretty good. On to the next one. What I'm excited to hear what you have to say about him. Eagles wide receiver Davonte Smith, 38 receptions on 60 targets for 537 yards and 2 touchdowns.
yeah, he'd be so much better if Jalen Hurts was throwing the ball well.
Yeah.
I like Jalen Hurts, and I think every week he's growing a little bit, but we saw Devonta Smith do this past week what I think he's been able to do all season. Like, I think with a lot of times with rookie wide receivers, the things that they struggle with more so is getting open at this level and understanding, route concepts and, how their route plays into the overall offensive scheme or the play and how that, how to approach the defense in certain ways. And especially when you're not a large man like Devonta Smith, like he's 6 foot, 170 pounds. I weigh more than him. I am a larger man than Davonte Smith, which is just bizarre. But that man understands how to run routes. He might already be one of the premier route runners in the entire NFL. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like a very odd, and this is a comparison that was given earlier in the season, obviously to make Philadelphia fall in love with him. But Nick Sirianni compared him running routes to Allen Iverson's crossover, which if you're young and or you don't follow basketball and or you don't know who Allen Iverson is, just Google Allen Iverson crossover. He got Michael Jordan with it. He got every defender that's ever existed with it, and he was always open to take the shot afterward. Devonta Smith knows how to get open at this level. There's not a cornerback that can cover him consistently for a whole game. And if he can just get the ball in his hands, he's probably going to make a play. There's been he's being littered with targets for most of the games this season, and they haven't resulted in as many catches as they should be. And having seen all the games, it's mostly just Jalen Hurts missing him. He's had a couple more drops than I think he was advertised to really come with, but that's going to happen. But this past week, I think we finally saw the most complete game of his season with six targets, 5 receptions, 116 yards, and a touchdown. That's his second game over 100 receiving yards. And I mean, he looks like the kind of guy that's just going to age really well in the NFL because he doesn't depend on, out muscling guys, even out speeding guys necessarily. He's just so crisp, and he's such a technician, and it's so fun to watch him play. And it's even more fun to watch the replays, even when he doesn't get the ball, because he's still open.
Yeah, that was one of his huge strengths coming out of the NFL draft, was how he creates separation. And it's beautiful. I mean, he creates separation in all of the legal ways too in the NFL. He is very good at being adaptable on his routes too. He's very good at tricking corners often to go off of their assigned roles by the use of his eyes and his body movements. Like you said, he is a very well-rounded route runner, which leads to great success in the game. He has 24% of the team's targets. He has 40.6% of the team's air yards. And one of the craziest part is he only has a 61.3% catch rate, which is crazy. But he's sustaining 3.3 yards after the catch. He only has 2 drops on 62 targets.
That's interesting. I feel like that's a little bit generous, to be honest.
Yeah,
I don't know how many it would be, but it feels like it's more than 2.
Yeah, that is from RotoWire, has him at 2 drops on 62 targets at least from that. But yeah, I mean I'm an Alabama fan, as literally everyone knows, but I loved him at Alabama, and I won't be shy in saying I had told you I didn't think he was going to have the best rookie year. I saw him as being one of the ones that had a little bit of trouble adapting to the NFL, and I am happy to be proven wrong. And he's the only issues, as most receivers are, he's heavily reliant on team scheme, and I think that has been a little bit of an issue because the Eagles have been trying to like find their own. But he is doing better than I expected him to. I expected him to have a huge like second year breakout, not as good of a first year as he had, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. But I am very happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I think the hope is just that he can be more consistent in his second year. I mean, he walked into the NFL and he was able to run an entire route tree, which is just not something that rookies can do. It's just not something that many really can do. So, yeah, it's just fun watching him, and I hope that he can, keep building off of, especially this big game that he had last week. Obviously, he has a couple tough matchups coming up in Denver and New Orleans, but then the schedule really opens up in that end of the season stretch with a lot of games, not only in New York, but also just against the NFC as a whole. So he could have I might be, we'll see. But he might have a really, really strong end of the season if Jalen Hurts can figure it out. So
that's the thing. And I didn't have him on the injury report because I actually didn't know about it, but he is listed as questionable with an elbow injury, but he's expected to play this week.
I think it's mainly precautionary. I don't. Yeah. It's not something I'm worried about. So.
Yep. On to the next. Pittsburgh tight end Pat Freiermuth. He has 27 receptions on 32 targets for 245 receptions and 4 TDs. 2 of them came from last game. I actually predicted him to have a touchdown that game, which I'm very proud of myself for. But why?
Because I lost 2 different fantasy matchups.
Oh.
Because of Pat Freiermuth.
Who would have thought?
Me. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm going to lose.
Yeah. I did predict him to have a touchdown. I actually had him in most of my MVP spots on FanDuel because I was that confident in it. But yeah, so not a lot, very little. I'm very bad at DFS.
Good.
Fun fact.
Hey, I still haven't beaten you, so
I know. So whatever. I can be good at some things and bad at another. I'll get better at DFS.
Yeah, I will say, so Pat Freiermuth's, overall his stats are very misleading because you look at the past 2 weeks, and I didn't do this beforehand, so I'm not going to try to do it now, but if you spread those out throughout an entire season, his stats are probably ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
The past 2 weeks, he's had 7 and 6 targets, 4 and 5 catches, over 40 yards in both, and 3 total touchdowns while playing over 70% of the snaps, which are the only 2 games of the season he's played that much. Part of that reason is definitely because of the absence of Eric Ebron. But really, I think you can just see Pat Freiermuth truly coming into his own on this offense. And honestly, I think he's exactly what Ben Roethlisberger needs because Ben Roethlisberger cannot throw past like 20 yards with any accuracy whatsoever. So, yeah.
Which is good because his average depth of target is 6 yards.
That sounds like an offense where Naji Harris has had a game with over 10 receptions. So that makes sense. But yeah, it's cool to see Pat the Muth really, breaking out because in any other year, he would have been, a darling, especially in the fantasy space, is probably what would have been the number 1 tight end by a decent margin. Like he had a very, he was a very good prospect coming out. But obviously Kyle Pitts was a unicorn and a generational prospect, which always is just going to make everyone else look worse, understandably. But it's really cool to see Pat Freiermuth coming into his own. And it just goes to show if Pittsburgh can, find an answer at quarterback, they have a lot of young talent to build around on offense.
Yeah. He was most often compared to a Hunter Henry type, which I've seen a pretty decent amount. 9.1 yards per reception, 217 air yards. He's averaging 9.4 fantasy points per game. I think, like you said, I think he's touted as a little bit less than as in the rookie tight end class because of Kyle Pitts, but he is someone I could see being just like a steady, reliant go-to for a quarterback that either can't throw or if it was a rookie quarterback. And I could see him having a pretty good, I don't want to say great, a pretty above average tenure in the NFL as kind of just this good, reliable is kind of how I see him. He does have a 3% drop rate, 4.1 yards after catch, which is a little bit low. but he has an 81.8% catch rate. So he's averaging 11.2% of team targets and 10% of team air yards. So, like I said, it's nothing like absolutely stellar. The first stat line we reads as completely stellar. Like 27 receptions on 32 targets is pretty stellar, and the 4 TDs, but again, 2 of those touchdowns came from this game. So I think it's pretty reliable, nothing that I would absolutely fawn over, but I'm excited to see him develop because I could see there's a lot of room for development with him, and with that development, he could be stellar.
You love the word stellar today.
I only
and
used
also
it twice, just there.
Used it a couple more times than twice.
No, I didn't.
I think you did. I'll count afterward. Or if someone wants to rewind and check and put it in the comments.
Now we need a Joe Judge counter and a stellar counter. Too many counters.
Well, and Urban Meyer. But yeah, Pat Freiermuth, he's not going to blow anyone away physically or anything. But, Jason Witten has a Hall of Fame career being not the most athletic guy in the world. We saw Zach Ertz do it for years, just getting peppered with targets because he knows how to get open. Pat Freiermuth can no one's expecting him to be Gronk or anything, but he can absolutely have an above average NFL career and last a long time with his just the way that he plays. So it's cool. I'm excited to see if Big Ben can maybe get him the ball a little bit more. But speaking of Big Ben, that brings us to our last guy, which is Naji Harris.
One more after Naji.
Never mind, our second to last guy. But first, we're going to go to Naji Harris, who is having a bit of a breakout campaign as a rookie on an offense where he is basically the only human being that runs the ball. He's had one game with below 80% snap, and I believe it's one that he got injured in against Denver. But he's been incredible. He's been incredible for fantasy. He's been incredible for the NFL. And I mean, he had a game with 19 targets, and that's unheard of, basically. So what do you think about Naji Harris?
Naji is touting, allowing himself to make a run for offensive rookie of the year, which probably it won't go to him, but he's making a good case for himself. His runs are just awesome. A great amount of broken tackles. Very good at finding holes. I'm excited to just kind of another one of develop, because if he's this good right now on an offense that's relying on him pretty heavy as a rookie, I'm excited to see his future in the NFL, because this is another one that could have an absolutely amazing career in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he's on pace right now for over 300 attempts and over 100 targets on the season, and a little bit over 80 receptions, and should be around 600 receiving yards and over 1,000 rushing yards. Like, the numbers he's putting up are incredible. It's not the most efficient stuff in the world, but on this offense, it's pretty hard to be efficient when I feel like the defense probably knows who is going to be sort of the first option to get a lot of touches. And it's really him, and it's Deontay Johnson. Chase Claypool hasn't really gotten going due to Big Ben, and Pat Freiermuth's still, a rookie tight end. So he hasn't had the most efficient, but he's had just an incredible amount of volume, and he's done a lot with it. So yeah, I do agree that he'll probably be in the running for offensive rookie of the year, but we'll see what happens. Guys like Jamar Chase might have something to say about that.
Oh, yeah, and that's who we'll talk about next. But 2 of his receptions came on a receiving. That's interesting.
Wait, what?
Is that what I have here? I have 4 touchdowns rushing, 2 receiving.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you said 2 of his receptions came on receiving.
Oh, sorry. I meant touchdowns.
Yeah, I think all of his receptions probably came on receiving.
Yeah, so he has 2 touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns. And that's crazy because it's like you said with his projected end of year stats. Those are numbers for like a rookie receiver and running back. He's sustaining for 2 players is what it is. Like that's a receiver who is also playing running back. It's crazy. He has an 11.3% broken tackle percentage, which is the number of broken tackles divided by rush attempts. 83.3% positive run. He just has that's the percent of run plays where he was able to gain a positive yardage, which is a really high number. That's a decent number for a rookie. 2.2 yards after contact, which is pretty good. His receptions, the depth of target is pretty low, but again, that's
not surprising at all.
Yeah, he has 23.8 touches per game. You know, he is just holding up pretty steady numbers across the board. And I am not surprised, honestly. He is exactly what I expected him to be, and I am loving being able to watch it.
And that'll bring us to our last guy, which is rookie phenom Jamar Chase, who might have finally had his first, quote unquote, down game of the season, really, this past week. But he has just been absolutely incredible. He has on the season 7 touchdowns. He's averaging almost 20 yards per reception. He's averaging over 10 yards per target, and he's got 73 targets and 44 receptions so far. For 835 yards. He almost has eclipsed. Like he's on pace right now to go over 1,600 yards, which is just ridiculous. And we'll see if it really, we'll see if it stays that way, because the Bengals have been slowing down as of late. But they have a bye week this week to hopefully figure some of that stuff out. But Chase is coming off probably his 2 worst games of the season. But the amount of targets he's getting and the chemistry that has with his college quarterback Joe Burrow is very clear. And it has just been incredible to watch. I mean, especially after an offseason of, I think, panic about the fact that he is not adjusting to an NFL ball.
Yeah, it has no white lines.
That's why I can't catch one either, Jamar.
Yeah. Yeah, his numbers are crazy. He's 25.7% of team targets, 41% of team air yards. He's averaging 105 air yards a game, 2 air yards a snap, a 13.1% average depth of target, which is awesome. So he's being targeted more on long balls. What else? His catch rate is 60.3 and his drop rate's 11. So catch rate is the number of catches made divided by the number of times he was targeted by the quarterback, and the drop rate is number of passes he dropped on targets. So the drop rate's a little bit high, the catch rate's a little bit the percentage is a little bit high, but it is nothing compared to the numbers he's putting up. The touchdowns were crazy. I mean, like, you saw that the first weeks and you're like, this is not sustainable, and then it's been sustainable. Like,
yeah, it feels like they hit on one deep touchdown every single week. Yep. It really does feel like that.
They really do. Or at least one. There was one last week that was a deep, should have been touchdown and ended on the 1 yard line.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think him being with Joe Burrow is a match made in heaven, and I mean, we all kind of saw that coming, but not to this extent. And watching him has made for nothing but fun football.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably the outright favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, especially with the way that most of the rookie quarterbacks are struggling this season. Typically, it's a quarterback award. It almost always goes to them just because. I mean, not even Justin Jefferson won it last year, and he broke records. Maybe Jamar Chase breaks those records again, but it seems like Justin Jefferson's college teammate might get the award that he couldn't, because he's just been electric. It's been insane. But yeah, that'll finish us out for our rookie report. Yeah, those were just some of we mostly focused on receivers, but also with Naji Harris and Pat Freiermuth. But it's just fun to look in.
We've talked about Kenny Gainwell before. We've talked about a lot of rookies.
Yep. But so now the last thing we're going to talk about is we're going to take a look at the coaches around the league, having officially now been at the halfway mark of the season. I think we have a much clearer idea than we did a couple weeks ago about the status of certain coaches and how safe their job is. So what we did before the show was we looked at all 32 head coaches, and we just basically kind of put them in categories of green, yellow, and red. Green being they're safe, not worried about it. Yellow being, maybe their seat's starting to warm up a little bit, and red obviously being, they're very much in danger of losing their head coaching job.
And then we have Greg Olson in the purple because it's not really his job.
Yeah, exactly. It's not often that you see the head coaches, interim head coaches, keep their head coaching job after the end of the season. So we're not even going to talk about the guys that we put in green. I don't even know if we have them listed anywhere to
We don't.
say.
We deleted them.
Yeah, that's fine. So we're just going to start by talking about some of the yellow coaches. And I know that Ashley and I don't necessarily agree on all of these, so it'll be interesting to just kind of have the conversation. We're going to spend a little bit of time on each of them and go from there.
Yep. And our first one is starting out with Carolina Panthers head coach Matt Rule. His overall record with the Panthers is 9-16, and this was one of the ones we actually disagreed on. I had Matt Rule in red as his seat is burning hot, and you had it more in yellow. So tell us why you thought it was more yellow.
Yeah, I mean, it's his second season. Obviously, Sam Darnold has been bad, and sure, you can put some of that on Matt Rule, but I think it's also on the front office they brought him in, they traded the draft capital for him. It's not working, and that's fine. It is what it is. It's nice that they took the shot. But I think, first of all, they knew who they were hiring, and they knew what kind of rebuild that they had to do when they hired him. They paid him a lot of money. It was actually a pretty big deal when I believe new Panthers owner hired Matt Rule, who was wanted by a couple teams, including your New York Giants, to be the new head coach. They paid him a lot of money, more than they normally give to first-time head coaches, and other owners apparently were pretty upset about that. So I think that I think that the owner is actually very patient. I think they know what they signed up for, and Matt Rule has a good history of turning around programs and really, building them from the ground up. And I think the defense shows you that, because they had one of the league's worst defenses the past 2 years, and this year it's one of the league's best, and that's without their first-round pick. Because they've just drafted a lot of really good defensive players, and it's been very well coached. So I would be very, very surprised to see them fire Matt Rule after only 2 years, because in all honesty, I think he's a very good coach. And if they can just find a quarterback for him, I think that this program is very much ready to explode.
Yeah, I don't know. I think taking the risk on the Sam Darnold experiment, obviously it was not his and his alone, but I don't know. Starting out on a 3-0 start, now on a 6-game losing streak, and I understand Christian McCaffrey wasn't there, but it doesn't bode well for him. I think unless this team starts making a serious comeback, and I'm not saying like playoff contention comeback, but making a pretty good run at winning games here, then the conversation is going to be had on do we keep Rule or not. I think you can have patience with a head coach that's only been here for 2 years for so long until you have to start looking at your future. And with a new quarterback, if we're going to get a new quarterback, do we want to have Matt Rule stick around while we get a new quarterback?
I understand your reasoning, but it's not as if it's like and this is just the first one that comes to mind. It's not like it's an Eli Manning situation where they have that veteran quarterback that's been there for a while. Matt Rule hasn't had a franchise quarterback. Like, they took a shot on Teddy Bridgewater, great. They took a shot on Sam Darnold, great. That's fine. PJ Walker is also going to be the starter for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So I think they could lose out and Matt Rule would still be fine. I don't even think that they would really come close to firing him, because can you really blame him for losing that many games with Sam Darnold and PJ Walker? And I love PJ Walker, big XFL guy, but can you really blame him? Really?
Yeah. I mean, the offenses look pretty discombobulated, so a little bit.
I mean, if Sam Darnold and PJ Walker were my starting quarterbacks, I think most offenses probably. I mean, look at the rest of Sam Darnold's career. So,
anyway, on to the next. Gotta make a crunch for time here. Cincinnati Bengals coach Zach Taylor, whose overall record with Cincinnati is 11-21-1. I didn't have him in the yellow. I kind of had him in the green, but you liked yellow. So we're starting out with two of I think our only two disagreements, but tell us why.
Yeah, so I think, and I think the big difference with him and Matt Rule is now Zach Taylor's in his second year with Joe Burrow. And obviously he didn't have Joe Burrow for the entirety of last year, but this is his third or fourth season as that coach? Fourth season?
I think third.
Okay.
21-1. What if those numbers add up to?
Oh God, that's too much math for right now. But either way, I think what it really comes down to is that if we don't see this offense really, really take off in the second half of the season, like Zach Taylor was supposed to be, the next McVay, just like everyone was supposed to be the next McVay. And I think
You're a
that
head coach in the NFL, you should be the next McVay.
exactly. But he was that young, hot, popular coach that everybody wanted, and he went there. You get Joe Burrow, and I don't like this offense has been strangely inconsistent in his entire tenure in particular, but also just in his time with Joe Burrow. Like we said, yeah, Jamar Chase is playing outstanding. And at times this offense looks to really, really be rolling, but at other times it just looks very discombobulated. And I think that's the big thing is now we've seen Joe Burrow with this head coach for 2 years. And I think of a guy like Joe Brady, who I forget if we're going to talk about it at the end, but Joe Brady's a very, he is the next McVay. He's a young, smart, rising head coach. He was also the offensive coordinator for that Joe Burrow-led LSU team a couple years ago. He's the offensive coordinator. He was a very hot offensive coordinator choice for Matt Rule in Carolina. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them just kind of say, okay, Zach Taylor's not working out, but we know we have the guy in Joe Burrow. We know we have the pieces around him in Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them make a somewhat drastic move after 3 or 4 years, depending on how many years it's been, because I clearly can't remember, with Zach Taylor. So
I think this is the third. Yeah, I could also just very well see this team has looked really, really well this year. I wouldn't say really well, but pretty good. I could see him sticking around. I don't know how many years are on his contract or anything. That's probably something we should have had.
It doesn't matter. Contracts don't matter for head coaches because it doesn't.
But still, it's okay. Maybe one more year. I think I could see him sticking around after this year, giving him another year.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think he's at all. There's a reason I have him. I think he's a yellow.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry. Moving on.
Yep. Next is Minnesota Vikings head coach Mike Zimmer, whose overall record for the team is 69-55.
Nice.
Yeah,
I think the seat's always a little bit warm with Mike Zimmer. But the Vikings don't really seem to care. They don't strike me as a team that is ever going to make the big change until they make all of them at once. So maybe if we see, but Kirk still has time left on his fully guaranteed contract. So I don't know. I don't see it happening. I think there's always a possibility because they've underperformed a lot this year. They've lost every close game that's ever existed somehow, as the Vikings love to do. But at the same time, I just don't get the feeling that he's going to be fired.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like I said, it's the Vikings. They're a little underperforming, but it's the Vikings, and they kind of have a blind spot for Mike Zimmer. I really don't have too much to add. I see him sticking around after this year. But the next one is Philadelphia Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni, who's in his first year with the Eagles, whose current record is 3-6.
Yeah, I have him in the yellow. It doesn't feel right to have him in the yellow. I think a lot of people want him to be in the red, especially around here, because he didn't run the ball, and now that's all he does. Granted, I think all that he's doing is probably the right choice. But I'd be very shocked to see the Eagles give up on Nick Sirianni unless there's some large collapse in the second half of the season. But Jeffrey Lurie is a very smart owner. He has a very, very good track record of coaching hires. Obviously Andy Reid was a no-name until Jeffrey Lurie hired him. He was the one to lure Chip Kelly out of the college game, and that worked for a minute. And then Doug Peterson was a no one when he hired him. So, and he won a Super Bowl, franchise's first. So I'll be shocked if he's fired. I think it would take a very, very large collapse in the second half for Jeffrey Lurie to do something that extreme.
I completely agree. I think a first-year first-year head coach with a quarterback who's in his first real year, still with starting, I don't see them really making a change. And I don't think he's doing as bad as a lot of people think, especially Philadelphia fans. But I think it's bad. I don't think it's absolutely horrid.
Gannon, the defensive coordinator, has been worse.
Yes, completely agree.
He's been in over his head. And I will say the same exact discourse was there for none other than Doug Peterson. Everyone, myself and I was about 50-50 on it, but wanted him gone after his first year. He won a Super Bowl the following season. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
Something else you have been saying is about Seattle Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll, whose overall record with the team is 159, 109, and 1. And you and I have had the conversation on and off screen about Pete Carroll kind of needing to figure out what he wants to do to
he knows
keep
what he
Russell
wants to
Wilson
do.
around.
He knows what he wants to do.
You use the quote that he is the only one who has the keys to unlock the kitchen to let Russ cook. So it's a pretty good quote. I have it clipped. But what do you think?
I don't think he's going to get fired. I think that he will be there for at least 3 years after Russell Wilson.
At least ever.
Or yeah, basically, like I think he actually came out like last week and he's like, yeah, the only reason I have a job right now is because of Russell Wilson. I would have lost my job years ago. And it's like, yeah, dude, literally, like you should have lost your job because of Russell Wilson.
Yep.
And I think they made it clear this offseason that like that franchise will not do what it takes to make Russell Wilson very happy because once again, there's trade rumors and there's talk that he'll leave in this offseason. And I think if you really want to shut them up, you fire Pete Carroll because Russ wants to throw the ball. Pete Carroll does not. There is a clear disagreement, and the Seattle Seahawks have sided with Pete Carroll. And he's a good coach, but he's not that good. You should not be picking him over Russell Wilson. Heck, I will go coach the team, and you know what I'll do? I will hand Russell the playbook, and I'll say, go ahead.
Cook.
I will give him the keys to the kitchen, and I will just
Cook.
stand there. It's fine. But he's not getting fired because the Seahawks are morons.
No. Yeah, I see him growing old with the Seattle Seahawks organization.
He's already old.
He is old, but growing older. I actually saw a TikTok of him with all of his clips from the last game. He's very funny, but not a great coach. And that's another one where I think the Deets offensive coordinator has done astronomically worse than the head coach has. So I could see the defensive coordinator getting fired. But next in the yellow, San Francisco 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan with an overall record of 34-41.
Oh, you mean the next McVay?
The next McVay?
Yeah, he might have been the first. I forget if he was hired before
next?
McVay. But no, I think he's in yellow because I think it deserves taking a hard look at him. But I think they've made I think they have a lot of stuff going on in that organization that they need to figure out. There's clearly some type of disconnect between what the front office wants to draft and what Kyle Shanahan wants on his team. Because you look at a guy like Trey Sermon, who was drafted in the 3rd round, who can't see the field, and a guy like Elijah Mitchell being drafted in the 6th round, who is all of a sudden their franchise running back. I see franchise with a very large asterisk, but they're the closest thing I have to a workhorse running back. I think Kyle Shanahan thinks he's smarter than he is. I think he's very smart, and I think he's very good at his job, but I think he now is trying to outsmart everyone, and he doesn't need to. But I think the decision to draft Trey Lance was probably heavily influenced by Kyle Shanahan, and I think for that reason, we won't see him gone until he gets at least like 2 full seasons with Trey Lance. So I don't think he's gone anytime soon.
I completely agree, and I think taking a look at Shanahan is more so taking a look at everyone around him. I think is at least how I perceive that to be. And our last one in the yellow is Washington football team head coach Ron Rivera, whose overall record with the team is 88-83, pretty close to even.
Wait, that's not his record with the Washington football team.
Oh, is that his record with another team? Because it broke it down by team. I might have wrote down with the other team.
Oh, yeah, that's the Panthers. I mean, he's only been there for not 2 full seasons, so I really hope
there we go. So that's
got to be the Panthers.
With the Panthers, in case you're curious. That's just a little fun fact. So I can't tell you his full record. I deleted the
that's fine. He had a good year, and now he's having a bad year.
Bad year.
Yeah, I don't think he's getting fired. He might deserve it as a literal football coach, but as a person, this franchise is just an absolute chaos, and he is the only sustainable.
Breath of fresh air.
Yeah, he's the best thing about that franchise, so he's not going anywhere. They are going to ride it out with him for the foreseeable future until there is some sort of semblance of normalcy in that franchise, because he is the only thing keeping them afloat in any way, shape, or form. So I don't think he's gone, even if a normal franchise might be looking to maybe move on.
Yeah, and from everything we've heard, he's a really good locker room guy. He's a really good leader. And that's something that this organization really, really needs is good people. So I think they're keeping good people around.
He is 9-15. Rivera is for the Washington football team. Thank you, Bub. Shout out, Bub. He was the idiot who dropped Saquon Barkley.
Why'd you do that?
Because he's a moron.
All right, into a very, very hot seats. Pants on fire. Chicago Bears head coach Matt Nagy. Overall record with the Bears, 31-28. Disaster.
Just fire him. I don't know.
Please.
I don't know if they will, because the Bears are seemingly morons.
The Bears.
But God, if they just want to save Justin Fields' career before it even starts, just fire him. Keep Matt Nagy away from him.
Look what happened when they kept him away with him from COVID.
It was his best game of the season, and then he followed it up with another good one. So, yeah, just please keep him. Just fire him. He does not. There's no reason he deserves to be there. He has not shown a look of good coaching since his first season with them, and since
his
then
starter is still Andy Dalton.
Well, yeah, I hate Matt Nagy. Yeah, just fire him. I don't know if they will because they're idiots, but his seat, I think, is probably the hottest in the entire NFL.
I completely
and agree. I don't think it's close.
Nope. On to the next. Fairly newer hot seat, I think. Dallas Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy. Overall record with Dallas 147-97-2.
Yeah, so I was surprised that there is this much conversation surrounding him. Honestly, like I know I want to hear what you have to say about him because he wouldn't have been on my red list. But apparently he's on a lot of people's hot seats. So I'm curious what you have to say. Why?
I think it's a lot of questionable personnel decisions. The way he's kind of really not playing up to players' strengths. I think this is the first year where he's like trying to. But yeah, he letting Dak play this week was probably not the best decision. That was not a great plan. It seems like the team is they're performing well, but in a little bit of chaos. And it just like all of the things that come out about him have been that he's not the best coach. I mean, personally, I don't have that strong of an opinion on him, but I could see why his seat would be hot, is more so why I have him in the red.
Yeah. I mean, I think if they go on to win the East and be a top seed in the NFC, I don't see him getting fired, but also I didn't like the hiring to begin with. I mean, like, one of the first things that Jerry Jones bragged about was that Mike McCarthy said that he watched like every snap of the NFL in his season off or season away from football. Yeah. And then he immediately comes out in the opening press conference. He's like, yeah, I exaggerated a little bit. I didn't actually do any of that. And Jerry Jones must have just been thinking like, good Lord, what did I just do? And like, but also like, he doesn't even have control of the offense. It's that dude whose name I keep wanting to call him Cooper Rush, and it's not Cooper Rush.
Cooper Rush is the quarterback.
Yeah, hold on. Dallas offensive coordinator. It's their former Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore has like complete control of the offense. They convinced him to stay aboard when Mike McCarthy came on. So we'll see. But yeah, moving on. Denver Broncos Vic Fangio's record is 17-24 with the Denver Broncos. Obviously, this year he had Bridgewater as a quarterback last year. He had Drew Lock, and he was brought over from that Matt Nagy Bears team. He was the defensive coordinator of that team and the league's best defense that season. So what do you think?
Yeah. I think one of the huge issues with Vic Fangio's job right now is, as a head coach, you may not have control over, little things in game, but you have control over schemes and what your coaches, your sub coaches do. Vic Fangio has been touted his entire career as being this highly defensive-minded guy. Defense wins games. I prioritize nothing if not defense, all of this. Denver's allowing 16.8 opponent points per game at home this season, and 17 points per game total, so home and away. They're allowing people to put up too many points on them. Another team that had a pretty good start, not great at following through. The recent trade was strange. I know it's front office, but I don't know. I think Vic Fangio is going to have a pretty hefty long conversation at the end of this season about either priorities for this team or finding a new place for him to be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because it seems like they're in a sort of rebuilding, and I'm not really sure. They're in this very odd middle state where they don't have that young development of quarterback. They purposely passed on him in the draft. They just traded away, their franchise cornerstone in Von Miller. So, I think they're a good team, and I think Vic Fangio is a fine coach. But I can also totally see why they would want to move on from him.
But we will move on. Houston Texans head coach David Culley, who is in his first year, and his record is currently 1-8.
Yeah, I think this one's pretty straightforward. I can understand why he's in the red, but honestly, I don't know how ownership would have had any other expectation for this season, no matter who the head coach was. And I think David Culley has probably been better than advertised. I mean, that's probably hard to say as a 1-8 head coach, but this is also his first head coaching gig ever. I'm not even sure he's ever been a coordinator off the top of my head. Mainly a wide receiver coach in Philly for a long time, actually. But yeah, I don't think he's going to get fired because, again, I don't know what else you'd expect from this garbage team without the quarterback that they're paying millions of dollars.
Yep. And until this team is in a full rebuild, I don't see him leaving. I think that's my biggest one. I don't even see them being in a full rebuild next year. So
yeah,
David Culley, to me, is staying. Someone who I don't know if they're going to stay, Jacksonville Jaguars head coach Urban Meyer, who is in his first year with the team with a record of 2-6.
Yeah, it really felt like a couple weeks ago. It really felt like he was just about to be fired any day now. Even after his first win in London, and even after all of the stuff about the video on Twitter. But I don't know. I mean, that big game against Buffalo, and it feels like Jacksonville's just kind of like slinked back into the shadows a little bit, which I think might be good for Urban instead of a crap ton of negative press. So. I'm starting to lean in the direction that he might actually get another year. I'm not really convinced of that either way, but I think it definitely depends on what this team looks like over the second half of the year, because it seems like he's starting to get out of his own way at least a little bit.
I agree. I think that was kind of the biggest thing, was he had absolutely no plan going into the NFL, and he even said that. He was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I think that is the biggest thing, is that getting out of his own way. But I think at the end of the season, it's going to be the question of, has Trevor Lawrence grown enough? And if not, are we going to prioritize Trevor Lawrence's growth or our contract with Urban Meyer? I think that's going to be the biggest question. Next, Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores. Overall record with Miami is 17-24. A man who was one of the coach of the year candidates last year is now sitting in a very hot seat. I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins are the most disappointing team in the NFL this season.
They are.
I mean, they were primed to make the playoffs, maybe even take the AFC East away from the Bills. That was a very popular pick. And their defense was outstanding last year. Their offense really started to kind of get in a groove a little bit last year, and obviously Tua going into his second year, more healthy. Obviously that didn't last long, but they get Will Fuller, they take Jalen Waddle, they trade up for him in the first round. Like it finally seemed like they were really going to take that jump and be like a true Super Bowl competitor, because they are the one NFL team that truly has felt in the past few years like they have been doing a, obviously the Sixers coined the process, trust the process, coined the term, trust the process. The Dolphins were following that mantra, and it is shocking to see their regression. Is it mantra?
Mantra.
Whatever. It is shocking to see the regression they've had this season. Obviously, they've dealt with injuries. Tua has been in and out of the lineup a bunch. And then there's also just all the Deshaun Watson stuff. Yeah, which and that's why I don't know if I necessarily blame Brian Flores. I mean, his job can't be easy when his starting quarterback is in and out of the lineup, and on top of that, having to deal with the idea of Deshaun Watson coming. The defense has been an absolute mess. So I don't know. I think how they end the season is going to be very, very important for Brian Flores, because if they can get a couple wins, maybe go on a little bit of a streak to end the season, I think he'll be fine. But if they continue out, I mean, they don't even have their first round pick this year. They gave it to us so they could take Jalen Waddle. So we might see a bit of a process restart, maybe.
I don't doubt that. And I think one of the huge things is with Tua and all of the trade rumors, he never once was like, during all of the rumors, was like, listen, Tua's our guy. Like, we're staying our course. And then if the trade happened, which if you thought that was going to happen, I think you're a little bit crazy. But if the trade ever did happen, then you can be like, listen, we thought Tua was our guy. We're going to take a chance here. But at least sit there and defend the guy who's trying to carry this team on his back. That it does no good for a development of a quarterback when you're sitting here letting these rumors float around the locker room, around the media. He's being questioned around every corner, and you never once were like, we stand by Tua and we're going to make this work. We understand it's not working right now, but we're going to figure it out. Like, never. Miami's only putting up 18.1 points per game on average, third worst in the NFL, allowing 29.6 points per game, opponent points per game. And that's for Brian Flores, who's defensive minded, who was coming off of a defense that was really good last year. I just don't get it. I don't understand why the regression is happening. I think it's doing no good for Tua's development. I don't know. I could very well see Brian Flores losing his job. Honestly, even if they make a pretty big run, I think it would to save his job would have to be a really good sized run.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If they really, I really like Brian Flores as a head coach. I really did before the season. So, I think if they can go on a little bit of the end of a run at the end of the season, even if it's just like end the season hot, like a 3 to 4 game win streak, and you can just go into the front office and say, look, this is what happened this year. I fixed it. We got this.
I think accountability is going to be the biggest issue with it. I think that's going to be what might save his job is the accountability.
Yeah. So, but last but not least, we have definitely not least, maybe least, is your New York Giants head coach, Joe Judge. He is 9-16 with the Giants. What do you think?
I think there's a very good chance Giants completely clear house. There's a lot of talk that Dave Gettleman, the GM, is out. With that, I think if Dave Gettleman is out, we are going to get a new head coach. I think that's a huge key piece to Joe Judge's job. Especially with a quarterback who's in a contract year. And there's a lot of talk about maybe Daniel Jones will be signed for 1 year with a transition team, basically, and then kind of gauge the development. Joe Judge is horrible. The offensive play calling we know he has a part in it. Not good. The scheme is not good. He is not a good leader. All he does is let people run laps. That's pretty much all he's good at.
And complaining.
Yeah, I don't see him keeping the job. Kind of really, I don't know. The Giants love to do this thing where they win a bunch at the end of the season and then keep all of their staff, which I could see happening just because it's what history has showed us Giants fans, what will happen. But I think a huge part of Giants is that you're in such a big market, right? And you have to keep your fans happy. That's a huge piece to all New York sports organizations, and they are not keeping a single fan happy right now.
And the owner knows it too. I mean, he's come out and addressed it, which I think is maybe the biggest thing.
There's videos of him like kicking over trash cans at games and freaking out. So I think Joe Judge loses his job, Jason Garrett loses his job. I think Dave Gettleman's gone. So I think they're going to clear house, and Joe Judge is going to be one of the first people to have his bags handed to him and say, please leave. As
an Eagles fan, I hope they all sign lifelong contracts and remain in their positions with the Giants franchise. I do. Why wouldn't I? Joe Judge is garbage. I love hating him. It's very enjoyable. And Dave Gettleman is just a moron who's terrible at his job.
Yeah, he really is.
But anyway, that will
and last thing is this team has so much young talent, right? Like so much good young talent, and this team is so likable. And there's absolutely no progression. How are you going to have a player like Kadarius Toney who absolutely balls out, and then you just throw it to him? Like him and Kadarius Toney combined for I think one.
Well, he is Kadarius Toney. Who is the other one?
Oh, sorry, he and Kenny Golladay combined for I think two catches this week. Like they're just not incorporating young talent. Like why aren't you letting Matt Pert start? Like it literally none of them make any sense, and they're prioritizing other things over development of young talent on a team that's not doing well. Why can't you just let the young talent develop? So I don't know. I think he loses his job.
I hope they can keep Dave Gettleman around long enough to give Saquon a multi-billion-dollar contract.
Yeah, of course you do. All right.
Yep. Go Birds.
Wrap it up.
All right. Well, yeah, that'll do it for us this week on the Undroppables Playbook. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple, Google, Spotify, under the Undroppables Playbook. You can follow us on Twitter at UN Playbook. And you can find me on Twitter, Michael Duncan, at MPDuncan75. I'm also the producer of another Undroppables podcast, The Undrafted, hosted by at Dino Game Theory. So feel free to check that out. We do an episode a week as well. And Ashley, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me and all of my content with the Undroppables on theundroppables.com. You can find me personally on Twitter at Ashley_Marie with 2 A's at the beginning of Ashley. You can find a lot of my content on the Undroppables TikTok page. And as always, you can find me here every Wednesday live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, chopping it up about football with Michael Duncan. And can find us afterwards, always on all of your streaming platforms. But we have a live video stream for our live shows and our live viewers, and I think we're going to get our viewers incorporated into kind of a mailbox episode soon. So make sure you're following us individually or UN Playbook to be able to submit your questions. And yeah, join us for our live shows. If not, come hang out with us in your AirPods, AirBuds, whatever you want to. But yeah, thanks for listening. It's a football podcast. We like to just talk about everything in the NFL: news, injuries, head coaches who we hope are gone next season. But who knows what next week brings? I hope you all have another great week of football, another great week in general, and we'll see you back here next week.
Have an awesome week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.